have a Bible tonight, you'll find our text in Hebrews chapter 11 and also in Exodus chapter number 2. We thank the Lord for the opportunity to be back in His house again tonight. And appreciate you that have come out. And we've got almost as many as Jesus had. He only had 12, and one of them was a devil, so we're right up there with him, amen. We began yesterday morning and want to continue tonight looking at the faith of Moses. We were drawn to a couple of thoughts in Hebrews 11, one of them at the latter part of verse 27. He said he endured as seeing him who is invisible. So we know the faith life has to do with seeing the invisible. Also, the writer of Hebrews said in the first verse of chapter 11, now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so we began yesterday with the thought that by faith Moses saw what you could not see. It wasn't about what he could see with these eyes, but seeing God with the eternal eyes. And I don't know about you, I'll not testify for you, but looking at Moses' faith and comparing it with my faith, I must cry tonight, Lord, increase my faith. Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. And on yesterday we looked at verse 23 in this section, and Moses and the faith of his parents. And then yesterday afternoon we looked at verse 24 down through verse 26 at Moses and faith's pattern. It matters not when you got saved, Old Testament, New Testament, the age of grace. The pattern will be similar. And we looked at those key words. Tonight I want to go to verse 27 and its counterparts in Exodus beginning in chapter 2 and look at Moses and faith's path. Faith's past. Many today claim of a salvation path. They say they had a place. They prayed a prayer. They made a decision. But often there is no evidence of a sanctifying path. And there's no growth. There's no running or panting after God. You see the multiple people that was here yesterday. And where are they at? Surely they're not all sick. Surely they're not all in the emergency room. Why is there no panting after God? There's no seeking for God. I want us to look tonight at Moses' path of faith. And as we begin to look at it, I want to draw our attention, if you've got the Bible there tonight, to Exodus chapter number 2. And I want us to see that it involved Moses' foreordained path. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, for this is the will of God, even your sanctification. It is God's will, if one has been truly saved, that there will be a strong path of sanctification. Jeremiah said, before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. It's interesting. I was meditating on that today. He said, I knew you. But those people that he sends to hell in eternity, he always tells them, I never knowed you. So I am only to think tonight, the only people that he has ever known in their mother's womb is those that are going to be saved. He says in Psalms 139, you possessed my reins and covered me in my mother's womb. He says in Psalms 139:16, you saw my substance and all my members before they were formed. Moses' foreordained plan, as well as mine, as well as yours, cannot be humanly charted out. But God did. And if one has truly been redeemed, the only way they can be sure of it is that there is a strong sanctification path, a desire to pant and seek after God. And if it's not there, you have grounds to believe you've never been redeemed, never been saved. I think about again today a couple of stories that are opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a young man, he's in his 40s. He's connected to me by a marriage. And 18 months ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and liver cancer. And he doesn't go to church. His wife doesn't go. They've never taken a little boy to church. And he had surgery at Emory University. And they got him in remission. His cancer was stayed. And 18 months later, he's back with a vengeance. He has now got maybe months, but probably weeks to live. And some time ago, when he got finished with all of his stuff, I asked him if he was saved. And he said, I am sure I'm saved. And he got mad at me. I said, I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe a word of it. He said, how come? I said, there ain't no sanctification path there. I said, there's no desire for God, no running after God. And so now that the cancer's back, and it's back with a vengeance, he's gotten in church. Matter of fact, from far as what I can understand, he's followed the Lord in believer's baptism. He's in a good, strong Baptist church there, not too far from where we live. He sent me an email the other day and told me that he really appreciated me just cold cocking him right in the face without any believe a word of it. And he said, I just wanted you to know, he said, for almost 20 years now, since college, he said, I've been addicted to pornography. And he said, God's beginning to help me to get some freedom from it. And I was thinking about it. He was claiming there for a good while, I think everything's all right. There's no proof of it, no sanctification path. I tell another story that is the other end of the spectrum. My middle son, who is with ACSI, is over 1,000 Christian schools, their accreditation on the East Coast. Several years ago, he had called me, and one of his good friends had apparently been saved at an early age, and he felt like now he was lost again and all that goes on. And he had prayed and asked the Lord to save him again, got baptized, all that profession stuff. And my son called me and he said, Dad, he said, you know, he said, I know I got saved at 5 years old there one night after church at the house. And he said, but you know, he said, I can't remember nothing that went on. He said, could you sort of tell me what went on that night? I said, no, I don't remember either. I don't have a clue. I said, but let's forget about that. I said, what's going on right now in your life. I said, you got any desire to read the Bible? Oh, Dad, when I get up in the morning, I'm hunting for my Bible. I want to read my Bible. I got to read my Bible. I got to study my Bible. I said, you can be assured of one thing, the devil ain't put that in your heart. I said, you got any desire to go to church? Oh, yes, Dad, I want to go to church. I'm going to have my kids in church. You got 8 kids. We're going to go every time the doors open. Hey, ain't no devil ever put that in your heart. I said, you got any desire to pray? Oh, yes, sis, I pray all day long. God will bring things to my mind and I'll pray for them. The devil didn't put that in your heart. It's not about what you did back there. It's about what's going on right now in your life. There must be a sanctification path. And I was thinking about Moses in Exodus chapter 2. There is nowhere, and if he is, I wouldn't mind you showing it to me. I can find no evidence where I can pinpoint and say, that's where Moses got saved. That there was a profession, a decision, a prayer prayed. But his life reeks with sanctification. He has a strong sanctification path. The only thing I can figure is that it was foreordained, and Moses started seeing what he could not see. Look at it with me, if you would, in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 11. It says, and it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. There he is identifying with the people of God. Most of the time, you're not going to identify with the people of God unless you have been redeemed. I'm telling you tonight, as Brother Neiman said tonight, this is the family. And if you don't want to be together every time the family assembles together, there's something wrong with what you got. Amen. There is a move to identify and be burdened for the people of God. It says in chapter 2 and verse number 15, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land. What in the world does he want to go down there for? To Midian. Well, that's where one of Abraham's sons is that he had by Keturah. He wants to be with the people of God. It is a sign that sanctification is working in the life. It says that he went down there in verse 16. Now to the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to their water their father's flocks, and the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them. He just happened, just a lucky guess, a lucky day. He happened to be at the well when all the priest of Midian, one of Abraham's sons, came to water their flock. So here, one of the other marks of sanctification, he's got providence working in his life. Oh, one of the marks of one is on a sanctification path. He clearly sees God arranging his life. It's not about some prayer you prayed way back there. It's about what's going on now. If there's nothing going on now, there's a good chance that meant nothing. Must be a sanctification path. It is a foreordained path. He stood up for these gals. If one is on a sanctification path, he will stand with and stand up for the people of God. I notice in verse 21, the Bible says, and Moses was content to dwell with the man. He became one of the priests of Midian, one of his shepherds. He began to work for him. He wants to work for the people of God. And he gave him one of his daughters, a daughter by the name of Zipporah. Oh, here's a classic mark of one who is on a sanctification path. Verse 22, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershon. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. He names this boy, I'm a stranger in this world. It's real close to our little thought. This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. Are you listening to me tonight? It is a mark of one who is on a sanctification path. It is a foreordained path. I thought it was interesting. His second boy that he had was named Eleazar. God is my help. Oh, tonight, when I see this path that Moses found himself on, this foreordained path, and when I see sanctification working in my life, God putting a desire in my heart to pant after Him, to get in His Word, the only thing I know to say is, Lord, increase my faith. Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Oh, Paul said in Ephesians, we read this verse yesterday, for we are His workmanship. If you have truly been redeemed, he said, you're my workmanship. That little word workmanship is the word poem, symphony, a song, a sculpture, created in Christ Jesus unto sitting on a Baptist pew whenever you want to, or staying home whenever. No, he doesn't even say that in the Living Bible. He says, ordain unto good works, which God hath before ordained that you should walk in them. Oh, if God has truly saved you, and if you're going to see heaven when you die, there must be evidence of a sanctification path, a hunger for God. There was a foreordained path. But I notice not only was Moses' sanctification path a foreordained path, but I noticed that it was a forsaken path. That little verse that was our text tonight in Hebrews chapter 11, it says in verse 27, by faith he forsook Egypt. And that little word forsook means to reject, to thrust off, to let go of a hold on, to leave behind, to abandon. Christianity is not a religion of accepting, but it is a religion of sanctification. It is a path that abstains from all appearances of evil. It is a path that demands that we surrender all. It demands that we give all. It demands that we love God with all of our heart and all of our might. It demands that we seek God with all our being. If that is not true tonight, you can say all you want to about your salvation path. If there's no sanctification path, there's a good chance there's never been a salvation path. And there's no evidence where you can pinpoint, boy, that's right there is where Moses got saved. None of that. But his life reeked with a sanctification path. I can tell you what, give me 1,000 people that have the testimony of a sanctification path rather than one that claims he's saved tonight and he has never had any growth, he's never hungered after God, he's never run after God, and you can't count on him at church time. I wouldn't give you a plug nickel for him. Are you listening to me tonight? There is a forsaken path. I was thinking again, it's not so much about what you did back then, way back in your profession days, but it is about what is God doing in you and through you tonight. Acts said that he was a man of great education. He was learned in all the wisdom of Egypt. But through faith, seeing what he could not see, he will become God's poet. He'll become God's songwriter. He'll become God's prophet. He'll become God's priest. And lead approximately 2 million people out of Egyptian bondage. He is definitely seeing what you cannot see. Reminds me of another that left his glorious home, condescended to this earth, became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. And oh, when I see faith operating in the life of Moses, he has forsaken the path of man. He's pushed all of that behind him, highly educated in all the realms of it. He's forsaken that. But I notice in Exodus chapter 3 that he forsook the path of man for the path of God. Notice the path that he's on now in verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert. He's tending sheep. Shepherds in Egyptian days were an abomination. They hated them. And he's going to be on the backside of the desert for 40 years. And I thought about it. He's working with the priest of Midian. Thought it was interesting. This word Midian means to strive with, to cross. It says that they were at the mountain of God, even at Horeb. It's a desolate place. It's a dead place. So in this sanctification path, if you're on that path, you'll see that God will often shut you up to himself, and he'll cross you. He'll strive with you. And so for 40 years, 14,600 days approximately, Moses is on the backside of the desert, alone with God. I hear tell that much time alone with God gives you power with man. Oh, you listening to me? Oh, if in your salvation experience it's not driven you to spend much time alone with God, it may be that you don't have anything tonight. Here, backside of the desert, teaching him by faith to see what you cannot see. Much time alone with God is never a wasted time. It is a great essential, the mark of the sanctification path. He gave up the path of man, highly educated, all that Egypt had to offer. He gave that up for the path of God. So if one is on the sanctification path, he'll see evidence that he wants to give up what this world has. I'm just passing through here. I'm not here to stay. Moses' foreordained path. It's forsaken path. But I notice in chapter number 3, Moses' focused path. If one has truly been saved and he's on the sanctification path, this is awful deep. I don't even know if you can get this or not. Might have to have a doctor's degree in theology to get it. He'll change his focus. It won't be about looking all around here, see what's going on, what he can do and what he can get into. No. He'll focus himself on God. Focus himself upon God. Notice Moses' focused path. It says in verse number 2 of chapter 3, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire. This angel of the Lord, most people believe, and I agree, that this was a Christophany. This is a personal, public human appearance of Jesus Christ. You say, preacher, man, you're all confused. Jesus don't ever come until Matthew's gospel. Well, if that's what you believe, what I'm fixing to tell you is going to really confuse you. Because I believe this was Jesus in the middle of this bush, in human form. He appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And the Bible says, and Moses said, I will now. You're going to do what, Moses? I thought you was tending sheep. He says, I think I'm going to take my eyes off these sheep and I'm going to focus in on something else. That's what sanctification's all about. It's about taking your focus off of all that you think is so important, all that you think is so got your attention, and focus it upon Him and Him alone. There must be that sanctification path. He says there is a bush burning. I thought it was interesting, this little word bush. It is only used in the Bible twice here, this little Hebrew word. Then it is used again in Deuteronomy chapter 3 when Moses makes this statement, goodwill of him who dwells in the bush. And the little word dwell there that Moses uses in Deuteronomy, we get our little word, the Shekinah glory, from. So this sanctification will cause us to do all things to His glory and before His face. That is the essence of sanctification. I want to always do those things, Jesus said, that please the Father. I want to please Him. So here, He turns aside. And verse number 4, and when the Lord saw he turned aside to see, God called unto him. See, when you change your focus from all that you think is important and you begin in this sanctification path to focus in on God, God will talk to you. He will speak. He will direct. He will say what needs to be said to you. And here he begins to speak to him. This bush is on fire. Yet the bush is not consumed. Oh, what a beautiful picture of Calvary tonight. Jesus hanging on the cross underwent all of hell's damnation in my place. Yet Christ remained, and He lived another day. And He tells Moses when He speaks to him in verse 5, He says to him, draw nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from thy feet. Middle Eastern sign of helplessness when a man takes both of his shoes off. It's just like him saying, I cannot do it, but you can. It's like almost like him saying, without you, I can do nothing. Oh, another great mark of the sanctification path is realizing I can't do anything. Lord, you're going to have to do it all. You're going to have to do it all. And on this voice speaking to him, He gives him an assignment. It says in verse 7, the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmaster, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. He wants Moses to go and to deliver them. If one has truly been saved, the mark of the sanctification path, He has something for you to do. And it's not sit on a bench and take up space at the Baptist church. He's got a job for you to do. You say, well, how do I find out what He wants me to do? Now, this is where it really gets intense and deep. And you may want to take some notes on this. How do I find out what he wants me to do? Ask him. Just ask him. That's if you want to know. Because if you asked him, he's going to tell you. And more than likely, he'll really spell it out for you. Of course, Moses' first thought was, if I go down there, and them people in Egypt, they're crazy. Do you have any idea? He's talking to this voice in the bush. He said, you got any idea who I should tell them sent me? And God says in verse 14, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. He said, tell the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. And the little word Yahweh, the God who is a present tense God, God who is always a now God. Could I close tonight in chapter 3 and verse 21? If you're truly tonight on a sanctification path, you will see that it is a foreordained path. God charted it out. It is a forsaking path, forsaking the path of man for the path of God. It is a focused path. God's wanting to focus you on Him. But this is what I love. It is a favored path. You will see God unusual. Just blow your mind as to how He will favor you on that sanctification path. He says in verse 21, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. He says that again in chapter number 11 and verse number 3. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Here, if one is on the sanctification path, how you'll know that you're on the saint. I meet so many tonight. They claim they're on their way to heaven, but their life is a disaster. Their life is a mess. There's no favor of God there at all. It's either one thing or other. Either they're not saved or they've never gotten on the sanctification path. Because those that are on the side, and I'm not saying it's easy sailing, you know, pie in the sky, everybody's going to get a Cadillac. No. But God will favor His people. How did it exist for Moses? Well, let me just run through 2 or 3 of them. Notice in chapter number 8, when he sent the plagues, he says in verse 21, else if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, upon thy servants, upon thy people, and into the houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies. I don't know about you, I don't like flies. And if at night, if I'm going to bed and I sense there's a fly in the house, I'm going to cut all the lights off in the house. I'm going to turn the light on in the bathroom. I'm going to wait for him to fly in there. I'm going to shut the door, and I'm going to send him into fly eternity. I don't like them. So all of Egypt is full of flies. But he says in verse 22, and I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no... Hey, y'all got any flies down there? No, we ain't seen a fly in ages down here. Egypt covered with flies. They're all in the house, in the drawers, in the closet, everywhere. Ain't no flies down in God's country. No flies down in Goshen. What's wrong? He's favoring them because they're pursuing after God. Chapter number 9. In verse 3, behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle, which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the ox, upon the sheep, and there shall be a very grievous murium. All of their animals in Egypt, they're dropping everywhere. They got a murium disease. They're dropping them. They're having to bury them everywhere. How's the animals down there in Goshen? Verse 4, and the Lord shall sever between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt, and there shall nothing die of all that is in the children of Israel. Hey, their animals are fat and sassy. They're doing fine. Ain't none of them dying at all. What's happened? They're on a sanctification path, and God is favoring them. I noticed too in chapter number 9 and verse number 10, and they took ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up towards heaven, and became a boil, breaking forth with brands upon the man and upon the beast. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils was upon the magicians, upon all the Egyptians. Everybody around Moses, they got boils all over them, including Pharaoh. Moses standing there. Hey, Moses, you having any problem with these boils? No, I ain't seen none. I ain't got none on me. Why? Because he's on that sanctification path. He's pursuing God. God is favoring him. I see in chapter number 9 and verse 23, Moses stretched forth his rod towards heaven. Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran upon all the ground. The Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt, so that there was hail and fire mingled with hail, very grievous. Man, it's thundering and lightning, hail, everything. Look at verse 26. Only in the land of Goshen where the children of Israel were. Hey, y'all having storms over there? Did y'all listen to the evening news? Man, it's going to be a bad one tonight. Man, we ain't had no storm over here. It all been clear as a bell. How come? Because God is favoring them on that sanctification path. I notice in chapter number 10 and verse number 21, the Bible says, and the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thy hand towards heaven, and there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. Moses stretched forth his hand towards heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt. 3 days it was dark. They couldn't see a thing. Verse 23, they saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had... Man, it's been light over here for 3 days. We ain't had no darkness at all. How come? Because they're on that sanctification path. And of course, the ultimate we'll look at tomorrow night. God will kill the oldest son and the oldest animal in every Egyptian's home. There ain't nobody going to die down in Goshen. Everybody's going to live. The path of sanctification, God will lead us in a plain, clear path. And he will always, if you're on that sanctification path, it's foreordained, will cause us to be forsaking some things. It'll cause us to change our focus to him. But it will be a favored path. It will be a path that makes a difference in our life. I was thinking about the little songwriter. God will make a way when there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to his side. With love and strength for each day, he will make a way. Oh, God will make a way when there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. By faith, Moses, seeing what you cannot see, has driven me in my sanctification walk to cry, Lord, increase my faith. Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Preacher.